Temi. Every word earned. He taught her everything he knew. He forgot that included how to walk away. She set fire to the ledger on a Tuesday, not metaphorically. She held the corner of the black leather-bound book to the candle on her father's mahogany desk. The same candle he lit every morning before his first meeting. The same desk where he had first sat her down at age 4 and told her to watch, to listen, to never let anyone in a room know what she was thinking. And she held it there until the flame found its appetite. Then she set the book down in the brass bowl he used for ceremonial offerings, and she watched 22 years of names, accounts, and careful arrangements turn to ash. Her name was Adaeze Yoon. Her father called her Eze. His men called her nothing to her face and everything behind her back. The half-blood, the anomaly, the girl who should not have been trusted with any of this. The whispers had followed her since she was old enough to understand Korean and Igbo in the same breath. Old enough to know that being both meant many people would always insist she was not enough of either. Her father had never cared about the whispers. Yoon Hyun-sik had cared about results, and Adaeze had been giving them to him since she was 19. She was 28 now, and she was done. He had started teaching her on the day her mother left. She remembered it in pieces. The morning light through the Abuja compound windows, pale gold and indifferent. The sound of a car. Her mother's hands, small and warm, pressing her face between them for the last time. Her mother's voice saying something in Igbo that Adaeze had not understood then and had spent years trying to reconstruct. Something about forgiveness. Something about survival. Something that ended with my love, soft as a bruise. Her father had not gone after the car. He had found Adaeze standing in the doorway, and he had looked at her with those long, still eyes that never showed what was happening behind them, and he had said, "Come inside, sit down, I will teach you something." She had been 6 years old. "Do you know why your mother left?" he had asked in Korean, because Korean was the language he used when he meant everything. She had shaken her head. "Because she did not understand what I built," he said. She thought it was about money. It was never about money. Money is just proof. What I built is about the fact that this world will take everything from a man if he lets it, if he does not learn to be the thing the world is afraid of first. He had paused, studying her the way he studied contracts. "You are my daughter. That means you will learn this. It also means you will be better at it than I am, because you are smarter than I was at your age, and you have something I did not have." "What?" she had asked. "Me," he said simply. "You have me teaching you. I had no one." She had not known at 6 whether this was a gift or a sentence. By 28, she understood it had always been both. He taught her to read a room before she walked into it. He taught her that information was the only currency that never devalued. He flew in a retired sole prosecutor to teach her negotiation when she was 13, and she had beaten the man in 3 of 5 practice sessions by the time the week was over. The man had left looking slightly stunned, and her father had watched the car pull out of the compound with the closest thing to satisfaction she had ever seen on his face. "What did you do differently in those 3 sessions?" he asked. "I let him think he was winning," she said. "I gave him small things he wanted, so he stopped watching for the thing I actually needed." Her father had looked at her then, really looked at her, the way he rarely looked at anyone. "Yes," he said, "exactly that." He taught her supply chains and leverage. He taught her how organizations rotted from the inside when loyalty became transaction. He taught her how to structure an enterprise so that no single point of failure could bring it down, how to insulate the core from exposure, how to make a network so self-reinforcing that removing one node only made the others grip harder. He was teaching her how to build the thing he had built. He did not realize she was also watching what the thing cost. She was 15, the first time she understood what her father's business actually did to the people around the edges of it. There was a woman named Chisom who lived in the compound then, not as a wife. Her father had never remarried, but as a presence, a warmth, someone who made jollof rice on Sunday afternoons, and whose laugh carried through the corridors like something from another world. Adaeze had liked her with the particular ferocity of a girl who had grown up in rooms that were always about business. One Sunday, Chisom was not there. Adaeze found her father in his office and asked, with the directness he had trained into her, "Where is Chisom?" He had not looked up from his papers. She understood it was time to go. Did she want to go? A pause, then still not looking up. What she wanted is not relevant to this conversation. Adaeze had stood in that doorway for a long moment. She had looked at her father, the angle of his head, the deliberate stillness of a man who was not going to be moved by this line of questioning, and she had filed the moment away, not with anger, with precision, the way he had taught her to file everything that mattered. She was 15. She was already learning that the most important lessons were the ones he did not know he was giving. By the time she was 22, she was running 3 of the organization's 7 operational verticals. By 25, she was his shadow in every significant meeting, absorbing the architecture of alliances he had spent 30 years constructing. By 27, he had begun the deliberate work of transfer, introducing her formally to the men who owed him, the men who feared him, the men who had built their own empires on the foundation of his goodwill, and were now, suddenly, looking across conference tables at a 27-year-old Nigerian-Korean woman and recalibrating. Some of them underestimated her. She had learned from the best how to let them. "They look at you," her father told her after one particular meeting in Lagos, where a shipping magnate named Okonkwo had spoken to her 3 times and looked at her father 15. "And they see a girl. That is not your problem. That is their mistake. What do you do with a mistake?" "I collect it," she said, "and I spend it when the moment is right." He had smiled. One of the rare ones, small and real. "You are ready," he said. "I think you have been ready for a long time." What she did not tell him was that she had also been preparing for a long time, just not for what he thought. She had started building the counter-architecture 3 years before she burned the ledger. It began with a woman named Blessing. Blessing ran a safe house network in Port Harcourt, not for her father, but adjacent to it, in that grey territory where his operations and other people's desperation overlapped. She was 41 and had the eyes of someone who had been watching exits her whole life. Adaeze had met her on an operational visit and had asked, in the middle of a business conversation, if someone wanted to start over, someone with nothing, someone who needed the network to not be able to find them, could you do that? Blessing had gone very still. "Hypothetically," Adaeze added. "Hypothetically," Blessing said slowly. "That would depend on how serious the person was and how much they were willing to give up." "Everything," Adaeze said. "Hypothetically, they would be willing to give up everything." Blessing had looked at her for a long time. Then she had said, very quietly, "Come back next month. Come alone." That was the first thread. She pulled others, carefully, patiently, the way her father had taught her to build anything that needed to last. One load-bearing element at a time, testing each connection before adding weight to it. She identified every person inside the organization who was there by fear rather than loyalty. She found the prosecutors who had been building cases for years that kept collapsing because evidence walked out of rooms. She located the families, the women like her mother who had driven away from compounds, the children who had grown up knowing their father's name as a warning. She mapped the whole thing, not to protect it, to understand precisely where it would come apart. "You are the most thorough person I have ever trained," her father told her once, watching her work through a risk assessment with the focus of someone diffusing something. He said it with pride. He meant it as the highest compliment he knew how to give. "I learned from you," she said, and meant it completely, in ways he was not hearing. The transfer happened on a Wednesday in February. Her father signed the last of the documents in his Abuja study, the same room where he had first sat her down at age 4, where the candle still burned every morning, where the mahogany desk held the weight of 30 years of careful, merciless construction. He looked tired in a way she had only started noticing in the last year. The temples had gone fully silver. The hands that had once seemed capable of anything were slower now, more deliberate. He was 63, and he had spent 63 years being the hardest person in every room, and it had done something to him that only she, who had watched him the longest, could see. "I want to tell you something," he said, after the documents were signed. He looked at her across the desk, her desk now, technically, which they both understood, I know I was not always... He stopped, started again. I know there are things I did not give you. She waited. Your mother, he said, and the word cost him something visible. I should not have let her go. I told myself it was because she did not understand, but the truth is that I did not make it possible for her to stay. I built something she could not live inside. I chose the building over the living. He was quiet for a moment. I have thought about this more than you know. I want you to have what I did not have. I want you to build this. He gestured at the heir, meaning all of it, the network, the empire, the 30 years, and also have a life inside it. I believe you can do what I could not. She looked at her father, at the tired silver temples and the careful hands, and the eyes that still did not show everything behind them, but showed more now than they had when she was 6 years old. I know you believe that, she said. I know you mean it. Then what? She took a breath. I'm not going to run it, Appa. The silence that followed was the heaviest she had ever sat inside. What did you say? He said very quietly. I'm not going to run it. I'm going to dismantle it. She kept her voice even. No emotion in the surface, just the clean delivery of information, the way he had taught her. I've been preparing for 3 years. I know where every piece is. I know who can be moved, who can be protected, who needs to disappear into something safer. I have arrangements with 2 prosecutors' offices. I have exit structures for everyone who was here by fear rather than choice. The financial architecture will be unwound over the next 18 months in a way that exposes the right people and protects the ones who had no real option. She paused. It will not be violent. That was important to me. You taught me that the cleanest operations are the ones no one sees happening until they are already done. Her father was staring at her, for the first time in her life, the first time in 28 years of watching him. She saw something in his face she had never seen there before. He was not angry. He was not calculating his response. He was not managing the room. He was undone. Adaeze, he said, and his voice was different, stripped of the architecture. Just a man, just the word, just her name. Everything I gave you everything. This was supposed to be... You were supposed to... I know, she said. And then, because she was her father's daughter and she had learned that the most important things deserved to be said directly. You gave me everything. That's why I can do this. I couldn't have built the exit without the education. You taught me how to read a network, how to find leverage, how to structure something that doesn't collapse when pressure is applied. I used every single thing you taught me. She held his gaze. You just didn't know what I was building it for. I built this for you, he said. Raw, unguarded. This was always for you. I know that too, she said. But Appa, you also built it on top of people, and some of them were people I love, and some of them were people like Mama, and I can't... Her voice, controlled her whole life, tightened for just a moment. I can't be the person who inherits that and calls it a gift. The candle burned between them. Outside, Abuja went about its afternoon. The cars, the generators, the enormous noise of a city that had no idea what was ending in this room. Her father sat for a long time without speaking. When he finally spoke, his voice was old in a way it had never been before. How long have you been planning this? Since I was 15, she said. Since Chisholm. Something moved across his face. Grief, maybe. Recognition. You never said anything. You taught me not to show my hand until the moment was right. He almost laughed. It caught in his throat. I did, he said. I did teach you that. He looked at her. Really looked at her. The way he had looked at her after those negotiation sessions at 13 when she had beaten the prosecutor. That look of someone seeing something fully for the first time. I taught you too well. No, she said, and she was surprised to find she meant it. You taught me exactly right. You just didn't account for who I was underneath the lessons. She burned the ledger at sunset, alone. The names turned to ash, the arrangements, the obligations, the architecture of 30 years. She watched them go without ceremony, without drama, the way her father had taught her to close things that needed closing. She thought about Chisholm's laugh in the corridors. She thought about her mother's hands on her face. She thought about all the women who had waited and become old waiting, all the children who had grown up knowing their father's name as a warning, all the people who had lived in the shadow of something they never chose. She thought about her father's face when she told him, the way it had come undone, the way he had said Adaeze, like a man falling. She did not feel triumphant. She had not done this to win. She had done it because he had spent 22 years handing her tools, and she had finally built something true with them. Outside, the first calls were already being made. Blessing's network was moving. Documents were traveling to the right offices. The first of the exits were opening. Piece by careful piece, the thing he had built was being taken apart at its joints, with the precision and patience of someone who had learned from the absolute best how to dismantle what could not be allowed to stand. Adaeze Yoon set the brass bowl down on her father's desk. She picked up her phone. She called her mother, who answered on the second ring with a voice that still sounded like something from another world, warm even across the distance of 22 years and one missed morning. "Mama," she said, "it's done. I'm coming home." She walked out of the compound into the Abuja evening, into the noise and the light and the enormous, unguarded openness of a life that was now, finally, entirely her own. Behind her, the ash cooled in the brass bowl. The candle burned down to nothing. The empire was over. The lesson remained. Be careful what you build in people. They will eventually use the tools you gave them to build something you did not plan for. He had taught her everything he knew. He forgot that included how to walk away. 3,050 words, third person throughout. No headings. Hook opens on action.